The wind that afternoon was not just cold, it was cruel. It sliced through the city streets like invisible glass, rattling storefront windows and chasing pedestrians indoors. People hurried past with collars raised and hands buried deep inside expensive coats, pretending not to notice the small figure standing near the corner of Fifth and Maple. The little boy's sneakers were soaked from melting ice, his thin sweater doing nothing against the bitter air. In his trembling arms, wrapped in a faded yellow blanket, was a baby girl whose tiny lips had turned a frightening shade of blue. His voice shook as much as his body when he looked up at the towering glass building behind him and whispered to the first well-dressed man who walked by, "Sir, my baby sister is freezing. If you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Whispertales 3. Stories like this remind us that second chances and compassion still exist in this world." The boy's name was Aarav Malik, and he was only 8 years old. In his arms was his baby sister, Meher, barely 6 months old and far too fragile for a day like this. Their mother had been admitted to a public hospital 3 nights earlier after collapsing from exhaustion and untreated pneumonia. There had been no relatives to call, no savings hidden away for emergencies, no neighbor willing to take responsibility for 2 children. Aarav had done the only thing his young mind could think of. He had bundled his sister in the warmest blanket they owned and gone searching for help. The building behind him belonged to Viridian Global Holdings, a company known for its sharp strategies and sharper profits. At the top of that building, in an office lined with polished oak and panoramic windows, stood its CEO, Rishan Sethi. At 38, Rishan had built a reputation for being disciplined, precise, and emotionally untouchable. Employees admired his intelligence but feared his distance. He had clawed his way out of poverty years ago, burying the memory of hunger and humiliation beneath layers of success. That afternoon, Rishan was leaving early for a meeting when he noticed a small commotion near the entrance. Security guards were gently urging a boy away from the door, assuming he was begging. Rishan would have walked past, he had done so many times before, if not for the way the baby's cry cut through the wind. It was thin, weak, and desperate. When his eyes met Aarav's, something shifted. The boy did not look defiant or demanding. He looked terrified. His face was pale, his nose red from cold, and yet he stood protectively over the baby as if he were a wall against the world. Aarav stepped forward, voice cracking as he repeated that his sister was freezing. He didn't ask for money. He didn't stretch out a hand. He only asked for warmth. Rishan froze. In that instant, a memory he had locked away for decades resurfaced with painful clarity. He was 9 again, standing outside a closed grocery store with his younger brother, both of them shivering while their father searched for work that never came. He remembered how invisible they had felt. How people had looked through them as though they were made of air. Without another word, Rishan shrugged off his heavy wool coat, custom-tailored, worth more than Aarav's family likely earned in months, and wrapped it carefully around the children. He bent down, his expensive shoes touching slushy pavement, and lifted Meher gently from Aarav's arms. Her skin felt like ice. The security guard stared in stunned silence as their CEO instructed his driver to warm up the car immediately. Aarav hesitated for only a second before climbing in beside his sister, fear and hope battling in his wide eyes. As the car pulled away, the city blurred past the tinted windows. Aarav explained between chattering teeth that their mother was in the hospital and that they had nowhere to go until she came home. Rishan listened without interrupting. Each word seemed to chip away at the armor he had built around himself. Instead of taking them to a shelter, Rishan made a decision that shocked even him. He directed the driver to his own home. His house stood on a quiet hillside, a modern structure of glass and light. Inside, warmth greeted them instantly. A housekeeper gasped at the sight of the children, but Rishan's tone left no room for questions. He ordered hot water for a bath, clean clothes from the guest storage, and called a private pediatrician. Meher was examined first. Mild hypothermia, the doctor confirmed, but no permanent damage if treated promptly. Aarav sat rigidly on the edge of a leather sofa, clutching the edge as if afraid he might be thrown out at any moment. When a steaming bowl of soup was placed in his hands, he stared at it for several seconds before eating, as though unsure it was truly meant for him. Rishan watched quietly from across the room. For years, he had measured success in quarterly profits and stock prices. Yet nothing had felt as significant as that simple bowl of soup disappearing spoonful by spoonful. That evening, Rishan visited the hospital where Aarav's mother, Kavita Malik, lay recovering. She was weak but conscious, tears streaming down her face when she learned her children were safe. Rishan assured her that they would stay at his home until she regained her strength. He arranged for her medical bills to be covered discreetly through a company foundation that had existed mostly for tax benefits until now. Days turned into a week. Aarav slowly began to smile. He explored the garden cautiously, always staying close to his sister. Meher's cheeks regained their pink glow. And something unexpected happened inside the vast, quiet house. It began to feel alive. Rishan found himself coming home earlier. He listened as Aarav spoke about his dream of becoming an engineer who built houses that no child would ever have to leave because of poverty. The boy's resilience humbled him. Despite everything, there was no bitterness in his heart, only fierce love for his family. When Kavita was discharged from the hospital, she expected to return to her cramped apartment. Instead, Rishan offered her a position within Viridian's Community Outreach Division, managing support programs for struggling families. It was work with dignity, not charity. He also ensured Aarav was enrolled in one of the city's best schools, scholarship fully funded but framed as merit-based to protect the boy's pride. On the morning they prepared to leave Rishan's house and move into a modest but warm company-sponsored apartment, Aarav did something that caught everyone off guard. He stepped forward and wrapped his small arms around Rishan's waist. It was quick and awkward, but sincere. Rishan stood still at first, then gently placed his hand on the boy's head. In that quiet embrace, decades of guarded emotion softened. He realized that success meant little if it didn't extend beyond oneself. Months later, Viridian Global announced a new initiative focused entirely on housing and emergency care for vulnerable families. Investors praised the bold move, unaware that it had begun with a single sentence spoken on a freezing afternoon. "Sir, my baby sister is freezing." Before this story ends, take a second to comment where you're watching from and share one act of kindness you've experienced or given. Your story might inspire someone else. As Aarav and Meher walked into their new life, hand in tiny hand, Rishan watched from a distance. He no longer saw reflections of his past with pain, but with purpose. One moment of compassion had rewritten 3 futures. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, share, and let us know your thoughts below. Your engagement helps stories of hope reach more people who need them. Because sometimes, all it takes to change the world is noticing a child in the cold, and choosing not to walk away.